The rules for addition and subtraction are very similar as the rules for multiplication and division of signed numbers. Here, though, the signs do not have to be right next to each other. We're going to have a multiplication symbol between them, and all that matters is the signs of the numbers. So we have a positive number times a negative number, or a negative number times a positive number. Then those two signs interact and give you a negative. One of each will give you a negative. If, on the other hand, we have two positives or two negatives multiplying, we're going to end up with a positive number on the end. And all you really have to do is figure out the sign and then multiply the numbers together, and that gives you your answer. Here we have a positive number times a negative number. So the answer is going to be negative, and 8 times 1 is 8. Here we have a negative number times a negative number. It's going to be positive, and 8 times 1 is 8. So it's going to be positive 8. Here we have a positive number times a positive number. It's going to be positive. 2 positive make it positive. 2 times 3 is 6. That's really all we're doing here. First, figure out the sign, then figure out the number. This is the same thing as negative 0.4 times negative 0.4. Negative times negative is positive, and 0.4 times 0.4 is 0.16. This is negative 1/3 times negative 1/3. And negative times negative is positive. 1/3 times 1/3, 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 is 9. Positive 1/9. Okay, order of operations, right? You're always going left to right for multiplication. So we need to do these two first. 0 times anything is 0. And then 0 times anything again is just 0. 0 is neither positive nor negative. Okay, same thing here. Negative times a positive is negative. 4 times 3 is 12. That's still multiplying the negative 1. Negative times negative is positive. 12 times 1 is 12. Positive divided by negative, the rule still applies. Even though we're talking about division here, it's still the same idea, because division is really multiplication by a reciprocal. So the same rules apply. Positive divided by a negative is negative. One of each is negative. 8 divided by 4 is 2. For this one, we have dividing a fraction. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. I just flipped that one. Negative times negative is positive. 3 times 8 is 24. 1 times 1 is 1. That's, of course, just going to be positive 24 as the solution. Now, what's interesting about this case here, I can just change these to divisions, and I get the exact same, the same rules apply. That this rule here, this just comes from this first one here. The same thing, just change the multiplication to division. Well, this one, written as a fraction, is this. This one here, written as a fraction, is this. And this one here, written as a fraction, is this. What that means is that I can take a negative that's in the top or the bottom and move it around. Typically, we like to write it this way because that tends to be the easiest to work with. But I also will write it like this, where I have the negative in the numerator. The negative in the denominator is really not desirable. So what that means here is that this one, right, I could have written negative 1/8 as negative 1/8. I can also write it as 1 over negative 8. Also, if I had something like this, where I had like negative of 1 over negative 4, I can take this negative and move it in front. And I have a negative and a negative, that becomes a positive 1/4. So it allows us to cancel signs by moving it around. Now, order of operations works very much the same. The sign numbers don't really change anything. You have to keep in mind the rules of how signs interact. So here we have negative 6 divided by negative 4 squared. Right, parentheses always comes first. Here, the parentheses are just there for clarification. It's negative 4 being squared there, not just 4 being squared. So exponents is really what I need to do first. Negative 4 times negative 4 is going to be positive 16. Okay, next I need to do multiplication and division, left to right. So this is going to come first. I need to write this as a fraction, so this really doesn't, this gives me a decimal number, and I don't want that. So I'm going to write it as, I'm going to divide top and bottom by 2. It's going to be 3 over 8. So negative divided by positive is negative. 3 over 8. Of course, I can move this negative to the numerator or denominator as I see fit. And I can also do this multiplication at the same time because the addition is always done last. So I have to do this before I can do anything between them. Positive divided by negative is negative. Plus a minus 6. But of course, plus a minus becomes just minus. And I have fractions I need to add up. So I need to make this common denominator. A negative 3 over 8. And then minus 42 over 8. It's going to be easier to keep the negative in the numerator, actually, because now I have negative 3 minus 42, or that's 48. I start at negative 3, and I go left 48 more units. So negative 3 minus 48, it's going to be negative 51. They're both the same sign, so I'm going to add them together. And then the denominator stays the same, right? And I can move the negative out in front if I want, or I can leave it there. I'm just going to leave it here in this case. All right, for this one, I'm going to simplify. The fraction bar means there's parentheses on top and bottom. So I'm going to first simplify the numerator and the denominator separately. Then I can do the division. Inside this, I need to do parentheses first. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and simplify this down to a minus there. Okay, negative 1 squared. I need to do that next. That's going to be negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. But of course, plus minus a plus is the same thing as just minus here. So I can just drop those. And 6 minus 1 is 5. Negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. And I'm going to write this as negative 5 over 8. I'm not going to write the negative in the denominator. Okay, this one, multiplication happens before the subtraction. Going left to right, negative 10 times 1/5. Negative times positive is negative. 10 times 1/5, that's 10 over 1. It's going to be 10 over 5. Times 8 minus 3. That's just going to be 2, right? Negative 2 in total. I'm just going to drop the parentheses there because I don't need them to clarify anything. Negative times positive is negative. It's going to be negative 16 minus 3. And of course, negative 16 minus 3 is negative 19. They're both negative. They're going to add up. You start at negative 16. You go left 3 more units. So negative 17, negative 18, negative 19 is the solution there. Okay. Once again, multiplication division happens before the addition here. That's all I'm seeing here is multiplication, division, multiplication, addition. Left to right. Negative 10 times negative 4 is positive 40. I need to have the parentheses here, so it's not weird to have division and a negative sign right next to each other. Okay, 40 divided by 8 is negative 5. Now I can do this. Negative 5, this was positive divided by negative is negative. Negative 5 times positive 2 is going to be negative 10. And negative 10, we start at negative 10. We go right 3 units. That's going to be negative 7 as our final answer there. All right, when the Badwater Ultramarathon in California first began, the race started at Death Valley, which is below sea level, down here at negative 280 feet below sea level. And it ended at the top of Mount Whitney, which is above sea level, way far above sea level at 14,505 feet. So what was the total elevation gain for this rate? Now, to do this, what we're doing here is we're calculating a distance between these two numbers. Distance is, we're talking about this distance here. We can actually think of this as a number line going vertically. And to find distance, we do subtraction. That's what subtraction does, is it finds distance. So we're going to subtract these two numbers. I'm going to subtract this number minus this number. This is 14,505, so I just forgot a 5 there in the end. 14,505 minus negative 280, right? 280 is a negative, and then the subtraction is for the distance. Minus a negative becomes a plus. And adding those two numbers together gives us 14,785. So it's a 14,785 foot increase in elevation. Now, what about if we flipped it around and found the distance going the other way? So negative 280 minus 14,505. Well, we have minus a plus. That's going to be minus. And if we do this, it's going to give us negative 14,785 feet. The problem with this is that negative distance doesn't make any sense in a real world scenario. But all I've done here is I've just changed which one I did first. And so there's kind of a discrepancy. It's kind of a frustrating thing here. Well, when we talk about distances in mathematics, we have to talk about the operation called an absolute value. The absolute value of bars like this, so the absolute value of A will equal the positive version of A. If it's negative, it's going to become positive. If it's positive, it stays positive. Because the absolute value, what this means is the distance away from 0. And distance is always positive. So whatever number A is, it's going to be the positive version of it, even if it's already positive. What that effectively does here is the absolute value. This here, we've already calculated that, is 14,785. And the absolute value of 14,785 is 14,785 units away from 0. So we get just positive 14,785. For this one, we have the absolute value of negative 14,785. And negative 14,785 is 14,785 units away from 0. So this becomes positive. So it's very simple when you have just a number inside, but absolute value has a lot more meaning when you go into other fields of mathematics. It does more than just makes a number positive. It really just means the distance, and so that's why it has more meaning. For us, it's just going to make the number positive. Okay, here we have negative 2/3, and I'm going to show that here on this line. I also need to have 3 on here, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Go negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Negative 2/3 is going to be 2/3 of the way up to 1. And we're asking, what is the distance of negative 2/3 from 0? We're asking, what is this distance when we have the absolute value around it? And that is 2/3 of the way from 0. The absolute value of 3 is asking us, what is this distance here? And that is 1, 2, 3 units away from 0. So very simple in these cases. For this one, we have negative absolute value of 7/5. 7/5 is going to be, let's see, 1, 2. 7/5 is going to be right around here. And so the absolute value of 7/5 is asking, what is this distance here? And that's, of course, 7/5. And then if this is going to be positive 7/5 because it's a distance, but minus a positive becomes negative 7/5. So even though absolute value is in the problem, that doesn't mean the answer is always going to be positive. The result of the absolute value will always be positive because it's a distance, and distances are always positive. Now for this one, we have negative 1, negative 2. Here we're asking, what is the distance negative 1 is from 0? And there, that is a distance of 1 unit. So it's going to be negative positive 1. And the negative of positive 1 is negative 1. Okay, now for in general, the absolute value of negative 5, right? This is just positive 5. Negative 5 is 5 units away from 0. Here we have the absolute value of negative 12 is going to be 12 units away from 0. So positive 12, which just gives us negative 12 is the answer. So this becomes positive 2 and minus, and this becomes positive 5. So you have negative 2 minus 5. Start at negative 2, go left 5 units. That's going to be negative 7 as our answer. And this one here, right, we have 1 divided by negative 4. It's going to be negative 1/4. The absolute value of that is just going to be positive 1/4. And the negative of that is going to be negative 1/4. Okay, we want to order these following numbers. So first off, let's simplify the numbers down and then go from there. We have negative 15, 5. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Negative 5 is 5 units away from 5, or from 0. So this just becomes 5. Positive 20 divided by negative 5 is going to be positive divided by negative is negative. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So negative 4. And negative 1 cubed is negative 1 times negative 1, which is going to be positive 1, times negative 1, which is going to be negative 1. The largest negative number is going to be the smallest in the ordering. It's going to be negative 15. The next largest negative number is going to be negative 4, then negative 1. Then the two 5s are the same, so those are going to be the next two.